Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host with another marvelous video. This time, every Injustice League member explored. While the Justice League stood for everything that was fair and right, the Injustice League was created in order to oppose their actions and stir up trouble across the DC universe. The Injustice League served as the main antagonists of the Justice League, and they've also seen many new members over time. This evil organization has been through 3 incarnations wherein each version introduced some new characters with unique features. Today, we'll explore each member of the Injustice League and tell you everything about them. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The first incarnation. The first incarnation of the Injustice League consisted of members such as Catwoman, Lex Luthor, and Sinestro, among others, and they were led by the intergalactic supervillain known as Agamemno. Agamemno's father was quite literally spawned by the Big Bang, which then made Agamemno one of the first cosmic beings to ever come into existence. He traveled across the universe and gained a reputation as an intergalactic conqueror who wielded immense power. After Agamemno got bored of taking over the universe, he decided to conquer Earth and stir trouble for the Justice League. He contacted Lex Luthor and then got in touch with several villains to form the Injustice League. Agamemno had even created a switch wherein a villain's mind could switch with that of a hero, and they would gain insight into these heroes' minds. Eventually, the Green Lantern used his power ring and a weapon known as the Absorbiscon to remove all this knowledge about the JLA from the minds of the Injustice League members. The Injustice League continued to stir up trouble for the Justice League even after losing their edge, and Agamemno was there to guide them. He was a being of pure energy who could swap the bodies of any living being and even transfer their consciousness, and he even had other powers such as electrokinesis, as well as the ability to reconstruct molecules. Catwoman. Selina Kyle, also known as Catwoman, is known for her affiliation with Batman, and she's had an on and off relationship with the vigilante for quite some time. She's quite a grey character who sometimes shows her villainous side while sometimes even works alongside Batman to fight crime. There have been many origin stories surrounding her existence, but the most common story is that she lived in a poor family with her parents, Brian and Maria Kyle. While Maria didn't pay much attention to Selina, Brian was an abusive father who didn't provide much for his family. One day, Selina returned home from school and discovered that her mother had committed suicide, and her father soon ended up getting alcohol poisoning. Selina then ran away from home and grew up to become a thief. She would even step out at night and quietly steal jewelry and diamonds from museums, as well as rich socialites. She once stumbled across a martial arts academy and then received training in various forms of martial arts. After crossing paths with the Batman on one occasion, she decided to get herself a suit as well, and she then took on the persona of Catwoman. Eventually, she joined several organizations ranging from the Birds of Prey to the Female Furies, and even contributed to the Injustice League. Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is famously known as Superman's arch-nemesis, and he's also one of the most iconic villains in the history of DC Comics. He was known for his sociopathic behavior as well as his refusal to accept the interference of any superhumans, such as Superman, in the affairs on Earth. He was the son of Lionel and Letitia Luthor, who were very rich and influential people in the metropolis. Luthor lived in Smallville with his aunt during his teenage years, and he grew up to become a power-hungry mastermind in his first comic book appearance. Over time, Luthor was portrayed as a mad scientist who would create new technology to counter Superman and any other heroes in his path. While he's a human being in a world of superheroes, Luthor wields a lot of power, and he's a well-known personality in business and politics as well. He's even ranked 4th on IGN's list of the top 100 comic book villains of all time, and he was instrumental in making the Injustice League as well. When Agamemno invented a switch that allowed the members to swap minds with a superhero, Lex Luthor had swapped his minds with his arch-nemesis, Superman. Sinestro. Thal Sinestro was initially an anthropologist based on the planet of Korugar when he came across a wounded Green Lantern named Prowl Goskotha. Prowl was a moment away from dying, so he handed his power ring to Sinestro and asked him to use its powers to battle his opponent, a weaponer of Qward. While Sinestro defeated Qward, he refused to return the ring to Prowl, even if it would have saved his life, and then left him to die. He then declared himself the new Green Lantern, and the Guardians were unaware of his actions, and they even accepted him. After becoming a Green Lantern, Sinestro eventually came to the decision that one can only maintain order in the universe through fear. He was then banished from Qward, and he later went on to find the Yellow Power Ring and even create his own Sinestro Corps. Sinestro often clashed with other Green Lanterns, such as Hal Jordan, and even joined the Injustice League at one point. Dr. Light. Dr. Arthur Light was a physicist who had turned to a life of, and he often faced the Justice League due to his criminal activities. After badly losing to them for the first time, he decided to face lesser-known teams such as the Teen Titans and even form a criminal squad of his own. He called this team the Fearsome Five, but their team lost to the Teen Titans horribly, and Dr. Light was then removed from his own group. He was pretty humiliated, and he later even lost a fight against a group of children, which made him a joke among other villains. He was later part of the Injustice League, and he had some unique powers, such as the ability to manipulate light, create blasts of energy, cast illusions, and even fly. When Agamemnon created a switch that allowed the Injustice League to swap minds with Justice League members, Dr. Light had swapped his mind with that of Martian Manhunter. Felix Faust. Felix Faust was one of the original members of the Injustice League, and he was essentially a 5,000-year-old sorcerer who had mastery over mystical magic. He was one of the most formidable opponents of the Justice League, and he'd spent years learning how to cast spells, summon demons, and even exchange his soul or sacrifice others to gain more magical power. When he was young, Felix Faust studied how his namesake, Faust, had also sold his soul to the demon to gain powers, and he then decided to do the same. He traveled across the world in search of magic, and he eventually visited the ruins of Ur and Lagash, where he discovered a copy of the black magic book known as the Necronomicon. He studied this book and even managed to summon 3 of the most powerful demons who were imprisoned underneath the earth for eternity. He then used their powers to gain even more control over the Justice League, but he was defeated by them. However, Faust kept returning repeatedly to stir trouble for them, and he finally joined the Injustice League. His mind was swapped with Green Arrow's mind when Agamemnon's switch enabled them to swap minds with Justice League members. Mr. Element. Mr. Element, also known as Albert Desmond, was a regular chemist with a dissociative personality disorder. Albert was a dutiful chemist who had studied chemistry his entire life, while Mr. Element was his alter personality that used his knowledge of chemistry to commit crimes. He even created an emblem shaped like a carbon atom and wore an atmosphere filter mask to ensure that he only inhaled pure oxygen. As Mr. Element, Albert created elemental weapons such as bulletproof shields and magnetic lights, and he even discovered a new element and named it Elemento. He was sent to prison after being captured by the Flash, and he then learned about the Philosopher's Stone and became obsessed with finding it. He then escaped from prison and found the stone before restarting his criminal career under a new identity, Dr. Alchemy. He was also a part of numerous criminal organizations, and one such organization was the Injustice League. As Dr. Alchemy, his mind was swapped with the Flash's mind when Agamemnon created the infamous switch that allowed them to peek into the minds of the Justice League members. Kronos. Kronos was one of the most powerful members of the original Injustice League, and he was also the archenemy of the Atom. He had a range of powers that allowed him to travel to the past and the future, and he often used these powers to trap his opponents in the past. While Kronos was biding his time in prison, he developed the ability to travel across time. He'd learned how to synchronize his movements and travel through time by aligning his movements to the click of the clock in the prison cell. His real name was David Clinton, and he was also known as the Time Thief due to the nature of his powers. This character was also inspired by Kronos, a personification of time in Greek literature, which further explains the nature of his time-based crimes. He primarily appeared in storylines that featured the Atom, and he was a powerful entity due to his ability to manipulate time. Black Manta. There have been different origin stories surrounding Black Manta, but he's always appeared as Aquaman's nemesis in all these stories. In one particular version of his history, Black Manta was a mercenary who also worked as a treasure hunter along with his father. While working as a mercenary, he was once sent on a mission to collect the blood of Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman. While Black Manta was trying to get his hands on him, Aquaman's father, Thomas Curry, stepped in the middle of their fight and even ended up dying due to a heart attack. Aquaman then blamed Manta for his father's death, and even went after him for revenge. Since Black Manta always wore a mask, Aquaman confused him with his father and killed him by mistake. When Black Manta realized this, he gave up on his life as a treasure hunter and dedicated it to finding Aquaman and killing him. Black Manta had no special powers or abilities, but was one of the world's best assassins. He aligned himself with the Injustice League primarily due to his vendetta against Aquaman, a founding member of the Justice League. Penguin. Born as Oswald Chesterfield Cobblepot, the Penguin had a hard time during his childhood while growing up in a middle-class family. Oswald wasn't a pleasant-looking baby, and his own father had even been disgusted with him right from the moment he was born. Oswald's mother showed him a lot of love and affection, but the rest of the world was cruel to him as a child, and he was often bullied for his short, stout appearance. His classmates at school would even burst into the restroom while he was there and say things like, "The Penguin is laying an egg." Oswald internalized all of this and eventually became a criminal known as the Penguin. After being an outcast for most of his life, the Penguin used his family's money to open the Iceberg Lounge and became involved in several criminal organizations. He even became a part of the Injustice League and used his connections in the criminal world to aid the other villains in this team. Zoom. Zoom, also known as Hunter Zolomon, was a former FBI profiler who even worked alongside the Flash, aka Wally West, in his initial years. He was also the archenemy of Barry Allen's Flash for many years, and he later believed that he could make Wally West a great superhero by posing as a villain and making him challenge himself. Zoom then stirred up trouble for Wally West and went on to become his greatest enemy, and he was even known as the Reverse Flash. Zoom had many unique powers, such as the ability to generate heat, phase across solid material, and even manipulate time and travel across ages. He was a part of various villain teams, including the Injustice League. The second incarnation of Injustice League. In the second incarnation of this organization, the Injustice League went international and included some new members such as Clue Master, Major Disaster, Clock King, Big Sur, Multi-Man, and Mighty Bruce. Eventually, Maxwell Lord turned this group into the Justice League Antarctica and also added some new members such as Gnort and Scarlet Skier. Clock King. Clock King was a regular human named William Tockman until his life turned around after he learned that he had a terminal medical condition and only 6 months to live. William then decided to go rogue and turn to a life of crime to earn money for his sister after he died, and he had nothing to lose at this point. He started calling himself the Clock King because he believed his time was running out and also because he had expert knowledge about clocks and timepieces. His time-related crimes were soon under the police's radar, and he was then arrested. While waiting for trial, he learned that he was healthy and that his doctor had accidentally swapped his reports. While serving his time, Clock King's sister passed away, and he broke out of prison to go after his doctor and take his revenge. Over some time, he became affiliated with the Injustice League, but he had some dissatisfying encounters with the other members. He eventually joined the Justice League Antarctica when Maxwell Lord reformed the group and later even joined the Suicide Squad. Clock King was quite stealthy, and he had the ability to manipulate time, and he was even skilled with technology and gadgets. He was even known as a marksman and was quite accomplished in unarmed combat. Clue Master. Clue Master was a major criminal who operated in Gotham City, and he always tried to get an advantage in his fights by attempting to uncover Batman's true identity. He was even known for his signature MO of leaving major clues behind after committing any crimes, and he essentially took the responsibility of forming the second incarnation's Injustice League. He befriended characters such as Clock King, Big Sur, Major Disaster, and so on. And then they all came together to form this criminal organization. While they started with a bang, the Justice League finally convinced them to give up a life of crime and even gave them a second chance to operate as the Justice League Antarctica. Clue Master even had some rivalry with the Riddler, and he feared that the Riddler was out to kill him. Since the two had similar ways of operation with clues and riddles, they wanted a monopoly over their signature moves, and Clue Master even felt threatened by the Riddler. Clue Master also had a vast range of gadgets, and he had a few pellets attached to his uniform that enabled him to release smoke, gas, or even explosives in the face of danger. Major Disaster. Major Disaster was another supervillain who started as a small-time crook, and he was earlier known as Paul Brooker. Paul was the son of an orthodontist, and he got into trouble with the police and even ended up in Thomas Kalmarku's apartment while running away from them. As it turned out, Thomas was one of Green Lantern's confidants, and Paul accidentally activated a panel that revealed the Green Lantern casebook. Paul read this book, learned the secrets behind their powers, and then used this knowledge to gain an advantage against them in fights. He even started going by the name Major Disaster, and he went from being just a thief to a supervillain who was determined to reveal the true identity of the Green Lantern and the Flash. He eventually joined forces with the Injustice League under the guidance of Clue Master, and went on to become a powerful entity. While he'd initially used the knowledge from the casebook to design sophisticated equipment, he eventually sought Neron, and exchanged his soul to gain more powers. He was then able to cause chaos around him, and even control things such as causing natural disasters such as earthquakes and tsunamis, or even causing someone to suffer a heart attack. Multi-Man. Multi-Man was formerly working as an assistant to Dr. Charles Ferris, and he was earlier even known as Duncan Pramble. During an archaeological expedition, Duncan stole and drank an ancient chemical known as the Liquid Light, since it was supposed to grant him extra lives with new powers. As soon as he consumed the liquid, Duncan's body was surrounded by a bright light, and he soon realized that he could attract or repel any objects. Moreover, Duncan gained a different power every time he died and returned to life, and he then assumed the identity of Multi-Man. In this manner, Multi-Man was essentially immortal, and he always gained a new power every time he died and returned to life. He even joined the Injustice League and worked alongside Clue Master, Major Disaster, and others, and he later even became a part of the Justice League Antarctica. Big Sur. Big Sur was primarily known for his physical strength amongst the members of the Injustice League, but he was also a little slow when it came to processing things. Born as Doofus Ratchet, he suffered from a malfunctioning pituitary gland as a child, which caused his body to grow considerably while his brain remained underdeveloped. He then became known for his strength and had a one-track mind that focused on violence and destruction. After being held at the Breedmore Mental Hospital, Big Sur was manipulated by a few of Flash's enemies into thinking that Flash had beaten them up and even killed a harmless rat. They even gave him high-tech armor and encouraged him to go after Flash and kill him, but the Flash finally came to his aid and helped him deal with his inadequacies. This didn't last for long, and Big Sur finally decided to join the Injustice League as well as the Justice League Antarctica. Nort. Nort was initially a member of the Green Lantern Corps, and he even belongs to a canine race from the planet of Newt. After some trouble with a fake Green Lantern Corps created by a corrupt villain, he finally made his way to the actual Green Lantern team under the guidance of Guy Gardner. He then briefly served in the Justice League of America's Antarctica branch, where he was in charge of looking after the members of the Justice League International. When Big Sur, Multi-Man, Major Disaster, Clue Master, and the others were asked to join this branch by Maxwell Lord, Nort also joined their group. Maxwell Lord had asked Nort to join Justice League Antarctica because he wanted to get rid of him, while Nort believed he was here to keep an eye on the former villains. Their sole mission in this group was to destroy the flesh-eating penguins, and this mission had even caused large-scale damage to their headquarters. Nort finally helped the Injustice League by using his power ring to keep them alive until more help arrived at the base. Scarlet Skier. Scarlet Skier, also known as Dren Keeg, initially used to study at the Manga Khan School of Melodrama. After graduating, he came across an ad placed by Mr. Nebula, who was looking for a cosmic locator. Dren decided to take this job where he was required to wear his iconic crimson armor costume, and he then became known as the Scarlet Skier. However, he was soon shocked when he learned that Mr. Nebula was using him to locate new planets only to redecorate them to suit his taste. And he also tried to quit this job on multiple occasions. He eventually came across Nort and even tried to fight him, but the two became close friends after Nort saved Skier from committing suicide. Scarlet Skier didn't play a significant role in the Injustice League on his own, and he was merely present as Nort's accomplice when he joined the Justice League Antarctica. The third incarnation of Injustice League. The third incarnation of the Injustice League is the most widespread group with numerous members. It was created as a joined alliance between Lex Luthor, Cheetah and the Joker. Cheetah. Cheetah has appeared in different forms across the DC comics, but she remains one of Wonder Woman's deadliest enemies across all comic versions. Initially, two women named Priscilla Rich and Deborah Domain would appear as Cheetah, and they'd wear cat costumes and fight against Wonder Woman. Over time, Cheetah's character has evolved and even gained superpowers, and Barbara Ann Minerva then appeared as the third Cheetah. This version of the character had undergone a painful transformation while becoming the leader of the tribe, and she would then suffer from physical pain in her human form while also experiencing rage in her canine form. Cheetah was initially obsessed with getting a hands on Wonder Woman's lasso of truth, but she later only started focusing on defeating Wonder Woman after her ego was hurt due to her failures. She went to great lengths to create trouble for Wonder Woman and worked alongside the secret society of supervillains, Legion of Doom and Suicide Squad. Besides her physical features, Cheetah also had the strength and speed of a feline and an enhanced sense of hearing and vision. After aligning herself with various criminal organizations, Cheetah joined Lex Luthor and the Joker to form the third incarnation of the Injustice League. Joker. Famously known as Batman's most dangerous opponent, the Joker is a chaotic villain who spread terror across Gotham City on many occasions. He's established himself as Batman's arch-nemesis and is still one of the most mysterious characters in the DC universe, as his real name, history, and motivation behind his crimes remain unknown. The Joker has an evil, disturbing smile, and he once fell into a chemical bath while working as a criminal called Red Hood. This vat of chemicals was the reason for his disturbing face and smile, and he then started calling himself the Joker. There are various origin stories for this character, but the most popular story states that he was an engineer at a chemical plant before quitting his job to pursue comedy. After failing to establish himself as a comedian, he turned to a life of crime as the Red Hood before finally declaring himself the Joker. The Joker had no supernatural powers, but he was a criminal mastermind who had stirred up a lot of trouble in Gotham City. He was even a part of numerous criminal organizations across the DC universe, and the Injustice League was his collaborative effort with Lex Luthor and Cheetah. Deathstroke. Slade Wilson had run away from home to join the United States Army at 16 after lying about his age, and he then established himself in the military after displaying excellent fighting skills and expertise in guerrilla warfare. He even surpassed the other soldiers in terms of strength and agility, and he kept getting promoted until a point where he was asked to participate in a secret medical experiment. Slade agreed to participate in this experiment, and it was later revealed that this was an attempt to create metahuman super soldiers in the army. Slade's body had a horrible reaction to the experiment, but it later turned found out that he'd gained super strength, speed, enhanced reflexes, and stamina. He eventually got tired of the army and started working as a deadly mercenary, Deathstroke. Deathstroke went on to become the greatest assassin in the world due to his military training as well as super strength, and he later joined hands with the Injustice League as well. Ira Sinril, also known as Fatality, was a resident of the planet of Xanshi, and she was sent to Okara to receive military training so that she could rule her home planet one day. When she returned after her warrior training, Ira learned that her world was destroyed due to a mistake by John Stewart's Green Lantern. She then vowed to get her revenge on the entirety of the Green Lantern Corps, and even started calling herself Fatality. She even used all of her warrior training to go after the Green Lantern Corps, and she finally arrived on Earth and discovered Kyle Rayner, who was the current Green Lantern. Fatality was a compelling entity that could fire energy beams and blasts. She could even fly across space and teleport from one place to another. She eventually became a part of the Injustice League while taking revenge on the Green Lantern Corps. Giganta. Doris Jewel, also known as Giganta, was one of the primary enemies of Wonder Woman, and the two had clashed with each other on more than one occasion. Giganta was initially a doctor who suffered from a deadly blood disease, and she then decided to save herself by transferring her life essence into the body of Wonder Woman, who was lying in a coma at her medical facility. While Giganta was halfway through this experiment, Wonder Girl interrupted her, and Doris Jewel then ended up dying. However, Doris's assistant then used her life essence and put it in the body of one of the gorillas kept as test animals at the facility. This gorilla was called Giganta, and Doris then started existing in the body of this animal. However, she was desperate to return to her human body, and she then abducted a woman named Olga to transfer her mind into her body. She managed to transfer Olga's brain into the gorilla's body, and she then took charge of Olga's body. Soon after, she discovered that Olga's body had the ability to grow to gigantic sizes, and Giganta then used this ability in her fights against the JLA, but especially against Wonder Woman. Over some time, she joined numerous criminal organizations, including the Injustice League. Gorilla Grodd. Gorilla Grodd was a highly intelligent entity known for his brains and brawn, and he'd actually gained his powers after being exposed to a meteorite. His entire tribe was then affected by the meteor, and they all gained special abilities such as telepathy and genius-level intellect. They formed a new society known as Gorilla City, and only went out of their society whenever they had a mission. During one such mission, Gorilla Grodd got captured by a circus, and we then learned that he's trying to steal his leader's secret. His leader's secret would have helped him to control others' minds, and he even got his hands on this secret, but the Flash then captured him. From this point on, he considered the Flash to be his nemesis, and he often sought fights with him or tried to go after him. He was known for his strength, agility, and intelligence, and he repeatedly tried to go after the Flash and steal his speed force. Moreover, he also could take control over people's minds and then force them to work for him. Gorilla Grodd was a part of the Anti-Justice League and the Secret Society of Supervillains before finally joining the Injustice League. Killer Frost. While various characters have appeared as Killer Frost across DC Comics, Dr. Louise Lincoln's Killer Frost was a part of the Injustice League. She initially worked as a doctor in a lab when she was approached by a former Killer Frost known as Crystal Frost. Louise looked up to Crystal and even thought of her as a mentor, and she learned that Crystal was dying due to her powers. After Crystal's death, Louise blamed Firestorm for Crystal's transformation into Killer Frost as well as her death, and she decided to seek revenge. While facing Firestorm, Louise chose to recreate the same accident that had caused Crystal to gain her powers and ended up becoming the new Killer Frost. She eventually even sold her soul to Neron to gain more powers, and she even joined the Suicide Squad for a while before finally joining the Injustice League. While working in the Injustice League, she once used her powers to freeze Red Tornado, but she was eventually defeated by Wonder Woman. Killer Frost could absorb heat and then turn it into cold temperatures, and she could even create ice structures or weapons out of ice. She could even tamper with a person's body temperature if she wanted them to freeze to death, and she was an extremely powerful member of the Injustice League. Cheshire. Cheshire was known for being one of the most deadly assassins in the entirety of the DC universe, and she had training in martial arts as well as the use of poisons. She was born to a Vietnamese woman who had an affair with an American soldier during the Vietnam War, and her mother then named her Jade and raised her all alone until they were separated. Jade was just 10 years old at the time, and she was eventually kidnapped and forced to be a slave for a while. However, she soon killed her master and then declared that no one could ever rule her. She later learned martial arts from a freedom fighter known as Wen Chiang, and she also learned everything about poisons after marrying an African assassin named Spitting Cobra. After learning from him, Jade poisoned him to death and then took the alias Cheshire. Over the years, Cheshire faced the Teen Titans and even created her own team of Ravens, and she briefly worked with the Injustice League before disappearing again. Poison Ivy. Born as Pamela Isley, Poison Ivy was an established botanist in Seattle who eventually crossed paths with a criminal known as Mark Legrand. Mark required Pamela's help in stealing an Egyptian artifact that had an ancient herb, and he then decided to get rid of her after their mission was over. He poisoned her with the same herb, but Pamela survived this poisoning and even discovered that she had become immune to all toxins or diseases. She called herself Poison Ivy and started wearing her signature green costume. Poison Ivy used her knowledge of plants to lure men into doing her bidding, and she also used certain hypnotic plant toxins to get whatever she wanted. She briefly even tricked Batman into partnering up with her, and she later went on to become one of his most dangerous adversaries. She also worked alongside numerous villains and even joined the Injustice League at one point. Shadow Thief. Originally known as Carl Sands, Shadow Thief was a common thief who got into trouble with the police and then landed in jail. He'd gotten caught because his shadow was visible from his hiding place, and he then spent many years in his prison cell studying his shadow and then trying to use it to his advantage. During these shadow experiments, he accidentally opened a portal to the different world of Zarapon and then managed to save the life of a scientist called Thar Dan. Thar gifted him a device called the Dimension Meter that enabled the Shadow Thief to shift his body to the planet of Zarapon and only appear on Earth in the form of a shadow. He couldn't be touched or captured on Earth, but he could still steal things with the help of some special gloves. Eventually, he caught Hawkman and Hawkgirl's eye, and he even joined the Injustice League at some point. Shaggy Man. Shaggy Man was created with the help of dead body parts and a material known as plastalloy, and he was an extremely strong entity who had managed to put up a good fight against the entire Justice League. He was essentially a synthetic being with no mind of his own, but his strength and regenerative powers were no joke, and he stood a chance even against some of the most powerful heroes in the DC universe. There have been different versions of this character across storylines, and the third Shaggy Man joined the Injustice League Unlimited after being recruited by Lex Luthor. He once appeared alongside supervillains when they showed up at Green Arrow's wedding with Black Canary, and he later even ended up on an unknown planet when all the villains were dropped there during the Salvation Run story arc. He could always come back to life, which meant he was essentially immortal, and he also had enhanced powers and senses that made him a pretty strong entity. Dr. Sivana. Dr. Sivana was a part of the Injustice League Limited, and he was a scientific genius who had been a part of various supervillain groups over time. He was primarily seen as an antagonist in various Captain Marvel story arcs right from the Golden Age, and he was portrayed as an intelligent but dangerous scientist who later even dabbled in politics. Sivana once asked Lex Luthor for help facing Captain Marvel, and he even managed to discover her true identity. As a part of the Injustice League, he'd appeared alongside various villains during their attack on the Justice League at Green Arrow's wedding. He didn't have any special powers, but he was adept at using technology to stir trouble for his opponents. Clayface. Clayface, also known as Basil Karlo, was a B-list movie star who lost his mind and turned to insanity after not being involved in the making of a horror film. He then disguised himself as the movie's villain, Clayface, and went on a killing spree on the movie set. He was finally captured by Batman and Robin, but he managed to set himself free. Clayface eventually joined forces with a group of other beings who were just like him, and he then stole all of their powers by stealing their blood samples and injecting himself with them. He then became the ultimate Clayface, and he even gained the ability to shapeshift into any form that he desired. He joined the Injustice League and other villain organizations, such as the Legion of Doom. Double Dare. Double Dare was a duo criminal team that was formed by two sisters called Aliki and Margot Marceau. The two of them used to be entertainers in the French Sac, but they eventually turned to a life of crime and thievery to gain wealth. Their intentions weren't evil from the start, and they first even embarked on this path just for fun. However, they eventually started turning to bigger crimes in order to become richer, and they even ended up as a part of the Injustice League. Effigy. Born as Martin Van Wyck, Effigy's childhood was quite traumatic as he lost his mother at a young age and then spent his life with his alcoholic father. Due to his father's neglect, he grew up to be a bitter person after failing to establish himself in the music industry, and he then even tried to get into trouble with authority figures. One day, he was kidnapped by the aliens known as Controllers, who were trying to replace their forces with superhuman beings, and he then gained new powers. The Controllers were trying to overcome the Green Lantern Corps, who were their rivals, and Effigy then caught the eye of the Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner. Rayner easily defeated Effigy, and the Controllers then decided to experiment on him further and make him a mindless soldier who only followed their orders. Effigy eventually returned to Earth and even got into a relationship with Louise Lincoln, and the two then plotted to defeat Kyle Rayner together. He even joined the Injustice League and had some special powers, such as the ability to generate heat, control fire, and even blast energy. Gerda. Earlier known as Tony Woodward, Gerda was a worker at a steel factory where he stirred up some trouble after assaulting a female worker. Amid the chaos, Gerda was pushed into a container filled with liquid steel and some recycled chemicals that transformed him into living metal. During this incident, he emerged more powerful than before and then went on a rampage and committed several crimes that eventually landed him in prison. Gerda managed to break out of prison eventually, and he even became associated with other villains and fought alongside the New Rogues before finally joining the Injustice League. Hammer and Sickle. Hammer and Sickle were a married couple who were a part of the team known as People's Heroes. This team consisted of super beings created by Soviet scientists to replicate the powers possessed by American heroes. Hammer and Sickle were two humans named Boris and Natasha who got caught up in this experiment, and the Russian zealots later sent them to San Francisco on a mission. The two of them finally ended up in Gotham City, and they even landed in trouble with Catwoman before eventually joining the Injustice League. Hyena. There were two characters named Hyena in the history of DC Comics, and they were both hyenas who could change their form whenever they felt any emotional stress. The first hyena was known as Summer Day, and she turned into a weir hyena due to an accident in Africa, while the second hyena was a psychiatrist known as Dr. Jivan Shi. Summer had fallen in love with Jivan and infected him while giving him an embrace. During the Infinite Crisis story arc, Deadshot killed one of the hyenas, and the other joined the Injustice League. Iron Cross of the Aryan Brigade. Iron Cross was a part of the white supremacist organization known as the Aryan Brigade, and not much is known about his origins or whereabouts. His team was once under the eye of the Justice League when they created a virus that could destroy anyone who wasn't born with European origins, and Iron Cross then fought Martian Manhunter during this fight. However, he was easily defeated, and he later worked alongside the Injustice League for a while. He was one of the villains who was sent to the planet known as Salvation, and he briefly even became a member of the team known as Cadre. Julie. Julie was a young woman born and raised in Brooklyn, and she later married her childhood boyfriend, Punch, who was also known as an infamous villain. The two were partners in crime, and Julie later grew up to become a thief and a skilled puppeteer. One day, Punch came across an abandoned chest filled with strange items, and Julie then used these gems to perform mesmerism and assumed a new identity as Julie. She even joined the Injustice League and other societies, such as Suicide Squad. When Punch mysteriously disappeared, Julie lost her mind and became catatonic, and she had to be admitted to Arkham Asylum. Jinx. Jinx was born and raised in India at an East Indian temple where she learned the secrets of magic. Jinx was an accomplished sorceress who could create illusions, fire energy blasts, and even manipulate elements, among other things. After attaining mastery over magic, she used her powers to kill the rest of her peers and her masters so that she could be the only force in the world who could wield these powers. She was eventually captured and then imprisoned at Star Labs, but she soon broke out and joined the Fearsome Five in their criminal activities. Over time, she was invited to join the Villainy Inc., as well as Cirque's group of villains. But these groups were destroyed over time, and Jinx then operated all alone before finally joining the Injustice League. The Key. The Key was initially introduced as a master scientist who originally worked with an organization known as Intergang. He'd used a mind-expanding gas on himself to tap into his brain's unused potential, and he then used this knowledge to come up with complicated weapons and criminal ideas. He'd developed weapons shaped like keys, keyholes or locks, and he also fiercely opposed the Justice League. Killer Croc. Born as Waylon Jones, Killer Croc had a skin condition that gave him scaly skin and sharp teeth and claws. His appearance made him appear like a crocodile, and his body kept increasingly mutating to resemble a reptile. Killer Croc was bullied for his condition at school, and he eventually snapped and killed his bully at the age of 8. He later became a sociopath and even killed someone on his 18th birthday. He was then imprisoned for his crime, and he later joined a traveling carnival where he was presented as the alligator wrestler named Killer Croc. Over time, Killer Croc turned to petty crime and dabbled in organizations such as the Injustice League. Lady Vic. Lady Vic, also known as Lady Elaine Marsh Morton, came from a long line of British mercenaries. Her ancestors had left quite an impressive collection of exotic weapons, and Lady Vic operated as a mercenary who used these weapons on her victims. During one of her excursions, she caught Nightwing's eye when she was threatening one of her clients to pay her for her service. Lady Vic targeted Nightwing for dabbling in her activities, and she later joined organizations such as Secret Six and the Injustice League. Magenta. Born as Frances Kane, Magenta grew up in Nebraska, where she was actually close friends with the Third Flash, aka Wally West. Frances discovered that she was developing new powers during her adolescence, wherein she was able to levitate small objects. Eventually, Frances's powers presented themselves in full force when she was driving across the mountains with her brother and father. Since she couldn't control her powers, their car fell off the cliff, and this accident ended up killing her father and brother. Frances's mother held her responsible for their death, and even stated that she might be possessed by the devil. Devil, and Frances then turned to Wally West. She also worked alongside the Teen Titans and learned to control her powers, but she still struggled with her life and eventually visited Star Labs to ask for help. Here, an evil scientist split her mind and created an evil personality called Magenta, which then caused her to go down a path of crime. Magenta eventually joined the Rogues, and even became close to Gerda, and she had some unique powers that allowed her to control magnetic fields and even manipulate magnetic materials to create shields or even levitate objects. Mammoth. Mammoth was a supervillain who was highly devoted to his sister, Shimmer, and the two of them were the founding members of the Fearsome Five. He was a superhuman with enhanced strength and stamina, and he was even sent away by his parents at a very young age. Mammoth's parents sent him to a scientist along with his sister in the hopes that they would learn to use the powers without harming others, but the two decided to become criminals and even go up against the Teen Titans. As a part of the Fearsome Five, Mammoth stirred up trouble for the Titans and even ended up fighting Superman and the Outsiders, and he eventually joined the Injustice League as well. Manticore. Manticore was a villainous entity who appeared in different forms across the DC universe, but he was initially a Greek man who was part of a terrorist group known as Jihad. He had a surgically enhanced body, and he even wore an exoskeleton that enabled him to shoot grenades out of his tail and even have claws grow on his hands. He first appeared in the Suicide Squad comics in 1987, and has ever since been a part of various groups, including the Injustice League. Metallo. Metallo first appeared as a scientist known as George Grant, who had a powerful suit of armor that helped him fight his opponents. He often targeted Superman and even went to great lengths and injected himself with special serums to increase his abilities. He also had a special beam that could decrease his opponent's abilities, and he once used this beam against Superman. Metallo has appeared across the DC universe in different forms, and he was later even introduced as a soldier named John Corbin in the New 52. Across all versions, Metallo tries to go after Superman, and he even joined the Injustice League to face Superman and the rest of the JLA. Mr. Terrible. Mr. Terrible was essentially a parody of the character known as Mr. Terrific, and he wore a similar costume and even did some makeup to resemble him. He later joined the Secret Society of Villains, and was also a member of the Injustice League. Later, he was sent to the planet Salvation as a villain, and he was even known to have horrible luck as everything he did turned out to be a disaster. Mirror Master. Mirror Master is a common name used by the enemies of the Flash, and the very first Mirror Master was a criminal known as Sam Scudder. Scudder was a genius who had designed a mirror that could focalize cosmic energy, and he often used mirrors to fool others or even attack them. Over a period of time, Scudder was replaced by Evan McCulloch as the Mirror Master. While the Mirror Master was an important member of the Rogues, he was even known for his missions alongside the Injustice League. Monsieur Mallah. Monsieur Mallah was the creation of a French scientist who had experimented on a gorilla and even used secret methods and shock treatments to increase his IQ. The gorilla eventually gained an IQ of 178, and the scientist named him Monsieur Mallah and trained him to speak languages and learn more about science and technology. After the scientist's death, Monsieur Mallah followed written instructions to remove his mentor's brain and attach it to a computer system to keep it alive. Eventually, the scientist's brain and Mallah came together to form the Brotherhood of Evil. Over time, Monsieur Mallah joined the Injustice League and other organizations, such as the Secret Society of Supervillains. Mr. Freeze. Earlier known as Victor Freeze, Mr. Freeze was a talented scientist whose life went downhill after his wife was diagnosed with a terminal illness. Mr. Freeze even started working at a corporate company under the evil Ferris Boyle to afford his wife's treatment. He decided to place her in cryostasis to preserve her body until he found a cure, and he then decided to steal his company's equipment to make some money. Eventually, his boss discovered his theft and sent his goons to kill Victor in their cryolab. However, this resulted in an accident, and Victor could then only survive in sub-zero temperatures. He then designed a cryosuit to keep his body temperature below zero, and he even got an ice gun before turning to a life of crime. He joined a number of evil organizations, and he briefly even worked alongside the Injustice League. Major Force. Earlier known as Sergeant Clifford Zmek, Major Force agreed to partake in an unusual experiment titled Project Atom, where he was placed in a chamber with an alien alloy. The alloy's durability was tested by exploding a nuclear device over it, and Major Force survived this experiment and even gained some powers as a side effect. His life went upside down when he was convicted of rape and even sentenced to prison, and he was once again offered a chance to either participate in this experiment or go to prison for a lifetime. He agreed to participate in the experiment, and this time he disappeared into the quantum field due to the explosion caused during the experiment. Zmek eventually returned back and even started going on missions for the government, and all the experimentation resulted in him gaining superhuman strength, speed, as well as control over dark matter and energy. He eventually started working as a mercenary for government-affiliated groups and even joined the Injustice League. Nocturna. Born as Natasha Knight. Nocturna had a sad childhood wherein she grew up on the streets of Gotham City and even begged people in order to get some food and money. She was eventually rescued by the crime lord Charles Knight, who adopted her and named her Natasha. While Charles was a criminal, he cared for Natasha and ensured she lived a comfortable life until a rival gang killed him. After her adoptive father's death, Natasha learned the truth about his life as a criminal, and she then decided to go to college and study astronomy. She finally went to the Gotham City Astronomical Laboratory, where she was exposed to laser radiation, and she then developed a light sensitivity disease. Natasha used all her inheritance money to reverse this disease, but her condition had no cure, and she finally turned to a life of crime to remain wealthy. She then took the persona of Nocturna, Mistress of the Night, and she also paired up with Charles's son, Anton Knight, to commit crimes. Nocturna later appeared alongside the Injustice League villains at Green Arrow's wedding with Black Canary. Phobia. Born as Angela Hawkins, Phobia discovered that she had psychic powers at a very young age. She then used her ability to read others' thoughts and learn their fears, and she soon started using this information to create illusions of others' fears and then manipulate everyone around her. She was finally sent off to train with the Titans, but she started feeling alone during her time with them. After vowing to protect herself on her own, Angela lived as an outcast for several years before finally joining the Brotherhood of Evil. She started operating under the name Phobia, and she later even joined Cheetah's secret society of supervillains as well as the Injustice League. Prankster. Prankster was a skilled cybercriminal who often appeared as Superman's enemy during the Golden Age. After the DC reboot, Prankster declared himself as Nightwing's arch-nemesis, and he even had a new persona in the New 52. Born as Oswald Loomis, Prankster was relatively young when he saw his father die in an accident. Oswald blamed William Cole and Mayor Cole for his father's death and decided to seek revenge. While Prankster had no special powers, he was a skilled intellectual who could pull off elaborate pranks and trick his opponents into falling into his trap. He also became an accomplished cybercriminal who could hack into government systems and wreak havoc. Moreover, he'd recently even started committing physical crimes, and he'd lay out elaborate pranks that were essentially death traps for anyone who got caught up in them. Simon. Earlier known as Simon Jones, Simon used to work as a physicist whose primary job was establishing contact with other dimensions. While trying to connect with another world, he contacted the evil Trigon, who then gifted him the ability to form psychic connections. Simon rebranded himself as Simon and used his psychic powers to wreak havoc and cause destruction. He had telepathic as well as telekinetic powers, and he could even read minds, warp reality, and even possess other people. Besides working in the Injustice League, he even joined the Fearsome Five group in his attempts to cause chaos, and he was also a fierce enemy of the Teen Titans. Queen Bee. Queen Bee was the ruler of an intergalactic beehive that was determined to spread her race all across the universe. Moreover, a scientist named Perkaz had developed an elixir of immortality and hid it in 3 vials on a planet called Somalar, and Queen Bee then created an army of bee-men to find this potion for her. She even tested them by asking them to loot different planets, and these men failed to loot Earth after being defeated by the Justice League. Moreover, Green Lantern also found the vials of the elixir and sealed them shut with the help of his power rings, which further caused the Queen Bee to seek revenge against the Justice League. She even clashed with Superman and other superheroes, and she was once a part of the Injustice League. Ragdoll. Ragdoll was a supervillain born with an unusual condition that caused him to have a triple-jointed body that made him quite flexible. In his early life, he started working alongside a traveling circus where he worked as a contortionist, but he was fired after the circus went bankrupt. He then turned to a life of crime to make a living, and he'd often disguise himself as a ragdoll while committing. This caused him to earn the title of Ragdoll, and he later even became a founding member of the Second Secret Society of Supervillains. He even went against the Flash during this time, before finally joining the Injustice League. Since he was naturally triple-jointed, Ragdoll's body was highly flexible and elastic, which helped him become a skilled thief and fighter. He was also a hypnotist and could charm people into following his orders. Riddler, also known as Edward Nashton. The Riddler grew up in Waterbury, and he was quite a curious young kid who would keep asking questions. His constant questioning would sometimes even annoy the adults, and Edward also liked to gain attention from others. His school had once announced a puzzle contest, and Edward would then break into his school at night to practice for the competition so that he could win it. He ended up doing the puzzle in just 15 seconds on the day of the contest, and he then received a book about riddles and puzzles as his prize. While he became fascinated with riddles, other kids at school would bully him and eventually drive him down a path of crime. He was obsessed with creating hype and committing crimes with the help of riddles that drew more attention toward him, and his crimes finally caught the eye of Batman. Riddler often tried to trick Batman with his riddles, and he was eventually captured and sent to Arkham. Over the years, the Riddler joined several criminal organizations and was even affiliated with the Injustice League at one point. Rock. Earlier known as Misha Flint, Rock was an astronaut who agreed to participate in a genetic experiment. This experiment modified his physiology so that he could survive in outer space without any technology or external aid, and he was then sent to the planet Salvation. Rock had some special powers such as super strength and stamina, and he was also trained in unarmed combat. He was a part of the Injustice League, where he typically followed the Joker, and he was also a part of the Superman Revenge Squad. Scarecrow. Born as Jonathan Crane, Scarecrow had a traumatizing childhood after his father used him as a subject for his experiments. He was locked in a room where he was given fear-inducing toxins, and Jonathan then lost all of his inhibition and became unhinged after his father passed away in the middle of the experiment. Jonathan was left alone in the room for days before being rescued, and he grew up to become a clinical psychologist. He'd even mastered all forms of fear, and he later went down a path of crime in Gotham City. Scarecrow even used a fear toxin gas to prey upon his victims, and he was quite a powerful addition to the Injustice League. Shimmer. Shimmer, also known as Celinda Flinders, was a supervillain who founded the Fearsome Five organization, and she was a metahuman who could change the nature of any element. She was the elder sister of the supervillain Mammoth, and both of them were metahumans who spent their early childhood in Australia. When they were young, the two of them would often get bullied, and they'd even resort to using their powers. Eventually, Celinda's parents sent them off to live with a scientist called Dr. Helga Jace, who tried to teach them to use their powers for good. However, Celinda decided to turn to a life of crime instead, and she even founded the Fearsome Five organization to create trouble for the Teen Titans. Shrapnel. Shrapnel's origins remain a mystery, and he's only appeared in various comic book scenarios where he stirs up trouble for the Justice League and the Doom Patrol. He was a mutated human whose entire body was covered with razor-sharp metal, and he was an undefeated assassin who had faced countless superheroes. Shrapnel had even worked alongside the Secret Society of Supervillains and the Cyborg Revenge Squad, along with the Injustice League, and he was finally defeated by Wonder Woman. Silver Monkey. Silver Monkey was part of the Monkey Fist cult, where he was trained to become a fighter with exceptional martial arts skills. This cult was an elite organization with members who wished to excel in martial arts, and Silver Monkey was one of their most accomplished fighters. He even ranked second best among all members of the cult, and he eventually turned to crime and started working as an assassin. He once sought a fight with Connor Hawke, the new Green Arrow, as he hoped to prove his skills to his superiors at the Monkey Fist cult. After emerging victorious in this fight, Silver Monkey was hired by Connor's stepdad to kill him, but Connor managed to defeat him. After accepting defeat, he returned to the Monkey Cult and later joined the Injustice League to work alongside other villains. Scorpio. Born as Dennis Samuel Ellis, Scorpio was first recruited to serve as a bodyguard to the gang leader, Dr. Arthur Villain. Arthur gave him a specially designed suit equipped with hidden weapons, and Dennis then started calling himself Scorpio. While working under Arthur, Scorpio killed several villains before finally ending up in prison after facing Steel. Scorpio then considered Steel to be his arch-nemesis, and he even turned to a life of crime and robbery after leaving prison. Scorpio was a part of the Injustice League as well as other organizations, such as the Secret Society of Supervillains. Sonar. After Beto Walden established himself as Sonar, the new Sonar continued his legacy by expanding his empire with the help of his psychic abilities. It's assumed that the new Sonar is Walden's son, and his name is also Beto Walden. Walden had been subjected to painful experiments that caused him to eventually gain his powers, and he was a cyborg who could create powerful blasts. He'd once battled Kyle Rayner's Green Lantern in Manhattan when Flash had appeared on the scene and then arrested him. During his time in prison, Sonar cybernetically enhanced himself and then altered his appearance before breaking free. He later joined the Injustice League and was also affiliated with the Secret Society of Supervillains. T.O. Morrow. Initially, T.O. Morrow was a college professor who had even invented new technology in the form of a television set that allowed him to see the future. He used this TV to study future technology and then use it to commit crimes in the present age, and he even invented the Red Tornado. The Red Tornado was an advanced piece of technology that could generate hurricane winds, and he even sent this robot to join the Justice League. While T.O. Morrow hoped that the Red Tornado would sabotage Justice League's missions, the machine rebelled against him and even helped the Justice League capture him. T.O. Morrow eventually freed himself and even joined the Injustice League. He also invented many new gadgets and androids that would wreak havoc on Earth, and he even worked with Star Labs and an organization named the Science Squad. Tar Pit. Tar Pit was born into a family of crime and was even the brother of a notorious drug lord called the Candyman. He was also known as Joey Monteleone, and he once got arrested for armed robbery. He was sent to Iron Heights prison for 15 years, and he then realized that he could astral project himself into inanimate objects and give them life. He then tested this power on numerous things before finally projecting himself into an asphalt body and getting stuck while his actual body lay in a coma in prison. He later joined the Secret Society of Supervillains, Rogues, as well as the Injustice League, and his asphalt body made him incredibly strong and undefeatable. Toyman. Winslow Schutt, also known as Toyman, was the owner of a toy shop who wanted to spread joy to children with the help of his toys. He also had a wife, Mary Schutt, and they worked together to bring happiness to other children after failing to have kids of their own. While their toy business was going well, Walter Dunhill proposed expanding his business by partnering with him, but Mary turned down the offer. Winslow also believed they should keep things simple, but he eventually agreed to sell his company and designs to Walter after his wife died in a car accident. After selling his designs, Winslow learned that Walter had sold his toy designs to a weapons manufacturer. Winslow then sent a teddy bear with an explosive inside it to Walter and killed him, and then started dabbling in criminal activities. He claimed that his actions were intended to punish adults and create a safe world for children, and he is even a misunderstood villain. Toyman used toys that were hidden weapons in some form to punish his opponents, and he was a part of various organizations such as Injustice League, Legion of Doom, and so on. Tremor of the Superior Five. Tremor's origins are not explained across the DC comics, and he's quite a mysterious character. He's a part of the Superior Five team, which consists of 5 supervillains with mysterious origins. Tremor joined the secret society of supervillains and appeared in the background at times, and he was even sent to the planet Salvation during the Salvation Run story arc. Two-Face. Harvey Dent, also known as Two-Face, was formerly the district attorney of Gotham City who even worked alongside Batman and Commissioner Gordon. However, he got into a freak accident after encountering a mob boss, and he even suffered an injury after the mob boss threw acid on his face. Harvey's left profile was then scarred, and this incident drove him to insanity. He even started calling himself Two-Face, and he was often seen using a double-headed coin to make decisions. This coin was something that his abusive father would use to give him an unfair chance to escape beatings. Dent had suffered a lot of childhood trauma due to his father, and his accident further drove him to insanity and caused him to join hands with villains and even become a member of the Injustice League. Warp. Warp's origins are unknown up to the point where he joined the Brotherhood of Evil, except for the fact that he only joined this organization to take revenge on Madame Rogue. He didn't explain why he hated or wanted to get back at her, but he succeeded in killing her during a battle with the new Teen Titans. He later even joined the Secret Society and the Injustice League, and he had some special teleportation powers and the ability to fly. Black Adam. Black Adam, also known as Teth Adam, has a number of origin stories and has often been redefined by DC Comics. In one of these versions, Teth Adam was well revered by the wizard Shazam, who had decided to name him his successor. The wizard Shazam bestowed his powers upon Teth, which then allowed him to assume the avatar of Shazam and gain special powers after saying the word Shazam out loud. Teth Adam then traveled across Egypt to get rid of evil and protect innocent people under the watchful eye of Shazam. But his methods became much more ruthless after his family was murdered. Shazam eventually started seeing him as corrupt and even labeled him Black Adam before banishing him to the tomb of Ramesses II. After spending centuries in this tomb, Black Adam finally broke free and then became an anti-hero with a peculiar sense of justice. He briefly worked alongside the Justice Society, but he believed that they were ineffective, and he finally joined the Injustice League to take a more proactive approach to fighting crime. Bizarro. Bizarro was essentially a duplicate of Superman, and he was created by Professor Dalton while he was demonstrating his duplicate ray to a teen Superboy. While demonstrating this ray, Dalton created an imperfect duplicate of Superboy, who personally thought this new creation looked extremely bizarre. The duplicate then misheard Superboy and assumed that he was referring to him as Bizarro, and he then took on this name. However, Bizarro wasn't accepted by others, and Superboy was then forced to kill him at a young age. Eventually, Lex Luthor recreated this duplicate ray machine and used it to create an adult Bizarro, since he hoped to get this duplicate Man of Steel to do his bidding. Of course, this version of Bizarro was also faulty, and he often talked in opposites and engaged in childlike behavior. He also had some powers that completely contradicted Superman's abilities, and he could emit freeze rays from his eyes and even breathe flame, as opposed to Superman's heat vision and freeze breath. Bizarro did share some powers with Superman, such as his super strength and speed, and he was a great addition to the Injustice League. Captain Cold. Captain Cold was born into a dysfunctional family where his abusive father raised him after his mother abandoned him. While his father neglected him, he then relied on his grandfather for any form of support. He was earlier known as Leonard Snart, and he even faced trouble in life after his grandfather passed away when he was just 12. He then decided to run away from home and commit crimes to make a living, but he was soon caught by the Flash and then sent to prison. During his time in prison, Leonard stole a cold machine, and he even made a cold gun that could create absolute zero. For example, it could completely stop all atomic movements. He used this gun to freeze objects, create cold fields, or even slippery ice patches. And he later created the criminal team known as the Rogues. He considered the Flash to be his nemesis, and he later even joined hands with the Injustice League. In the Smallville series, we see some other members of the team. The Injustice League also made an appearance in the Smallville series in an episode titled Injustice, wherein a few members of the team included Livewire, Neutron, Plastique, Parasite, and Eva Greer were introduced. Many of these new members were recruited by Tess Mercer to work together, and they then formed a team of rogue mutants who worked together to find the undefeatable Doomsday. Livewire, aka Leslie Willis, was initially a human who returned to a life of crime after losing her job and even turning into a meta-human. She primarily served as Superman's enemy and joined other organizations such as the Superman Revenge Squad and the Supermen of America. Her powers mostly revolved around electricity, which also gave her the name Livewire. And she could generate, absorb, or even control electricity. She could even manipulate energy and use it for different purposes. And she even had some powers that helped her to fly, levitate, and even teleport. Livewire had a few different origin stories depending on the comic arc, and she appeared as a meteor freak in Smallville, wherein she'd gained her powers after coming into contact with kryptonite. Livewire often targeted Superman, and she would even make fun of him on air when she worked as a radio jockey before her transformation into a villain. However, she later started blaming Superman for the energy accident that caused her to turn into Livewire, and she then made it her mission to torment him as part of the Injustice League. Neutron. Nathaniel Tryon, also known as Neutron, is a supervillain who had first joined the evil Legion of Doom organization. He was a metahuman who used to initially be a regular criminal called Nathaniel until his life turned around when he was caught in the middle of a nuclear meltdown. Neutron's body matter then turned into sentient energy and gave him a lot of enhanced abilities and powers. His special powers included super strength, durability, and the ability to fire nuclear blasts and even absorb radiation. He often went against Superman, and he even worked under Lex Luthor's orders for the most part. Neutron even joined the secret society of supervillains at one point, but his character was often defeated by Superman during this time. Neutron had even ended up getting arrested on multiple occasions, but he always managed to get himself out of such situations. Plastique was quite well known as a terrorist and was part of an extremist French-Canadian separatist group that engaged in terrorist activities. She was once seen wearing a suit covered in bombs during a significant story arc where she barged into a famous newspaper office in New York and threatened to blow the place up unless her demands were met. Plastique was a mutant who was a part of various storylines wherein she once even teamed up with the Suicide Squad to defeat the Justice League. While she initially wore a suit covered with explosives, her character eventually gained the ability to fire concussive blasts by touching an object. Her journey from being a terrorist to gaining her powers was explored in the Smallville series in an episode titled Plastique, and she was then recruited by Tess Mercer to join the Injustice League. Parasite. Rudy Jones, aka Parasite, was initially a worker at Star Labs, where he got into an accident after opening a dangerous crate filled with hazardous, radioactive material. After being exposed to the radiation, he turned into a purple-skinned humanoid who could suck the energy out of other beings. Parasite would absorb others' energy to ensure his own survival, and his aim was to feed on Superman so that he could finally enjoy the meal of a lifetime. He worked alongside the Injustice League to find Doomsday, and he was once even recruited to be a part of the Superman Revenge Squad. Parasite had the ability to absorb the life force out of any being, and he could even absorb the DNA of his victims. He was essentially a metahuman who had once even absorbed Clark Kent's powers, and given him a good fight as a member of the Injustice League in the Smallville series. Eva Greer. Eva Greer initially worked as an assistant to Tess Mercer, who was the CEO of the Luthor Corps organization. Tess was working on assembling the Injustice League, and she recruited Eva to work alongside Parasite, Plastique, and the others to capture Doomsday. Eva was handed the responsibility of gathering information on Clark Kent by taking on a disguise, but she later turned on Tess and assumed an evil form after going against her employer. She was even known as Mirror, and she had the ability to cast psychic illusions. Moreover, she could assume the identity of a different person, which means that she had some shape-shifting powers as well. To sum it up, the Injustice League is quite an established organization that has terrorized people since forever, and they've always put up quite a fight against the Justice League. The organization is also composed of some of the most evil and twisted villains in the DC universe, and it's quite a challenge to go up against them. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks everyone.
But stranded more than a power ring's charge from home, we found ourselves dependent on the kindness of strangers.